Hello everyone, my name is Xiomaro and welcome back to the channel. So last week I made a video about the potential synergies of Wrecking Ball and Sigma. The main purpose of the video was actually to outline the Wrecking Ball Sigma combo, but I made a bit of a mistake in the title and some of the content of the video. I described Sigma as an off-tank in the combo, and I even said that he was something of an off-tank in general. Honestly, categorizing Sigma as a main or off-tank wasn't the purpose of that video. I think most people understood that I was mainly trying to showcase the tank combo, but there were a good number of people who got pretty hung up on the fact that I would call Sigma an off-tank. So I thought it might be an idea to have a more in-depth discussion on that topic. So, is Sigma a main tank or off-tank? Straight off the bat, people are going to point to Jeff Kaplan referring to Sigma as a barrier tank in the developer update. It's important to note that barrier tank doesn't necessarily equal main tank. However, Jeff did directly call Sigma a main tank in Seagull's stream, so the official categorization of Sigma right now is main tank. However, just because someone from Blizzard calls him a main tank doesn't mean he is a main tank. In that same stream, Jeff also said that Sigma's shift ability couldn't eat ultimates, and we all know that it can indeed eat ultimates. Plus there's the whole Symmetra categorized as a support thing for so long. Honestly, I always thought she was a bit of a DPS, but Blizzard definitely wanted her to be a support, hence the multiple reworks. But I think most people can agree that since they finally recategorized her as a DPS, she's in the best position she's ever been. Attack Symmetra isn't just a troll pick now, it can be absurdly strong. And then back to Sigma, there's the whole does it even matter argument, which I think definitely holds weight. Like, Roadhog is a tank who can totally act as a DPS. Zen is a support who can totally act as a DPS. Soldier has healing capabilities and has been run in the support slot in pro games, and Mei can be played much like a tank. And the list goes on. The truth is, the categorization of heroes, including the official Blizzard ones, are only a guideline. Remember when Widowmaker was put under the defense category? I mean, I can keep giving examples of poor categorization of heroes, but let's get back to Sigma. What really matters with Sigma is how he plays in a real game. And partly for that reason, I've been playing him as much as possible since his release, both to add him to my hero pool and, as I mentioned, figure out where he fits into the meta before he hits live servers. I feel like I've got a lot to learn with him still, but I've been winning a lot of games as him and climbing pretty quickly. So while I definitely can't claim to be an expert on the hero, I feel like, relatively speaking, I've got a reasonable amount of experience playing him. And the short answer is, yeah, I was wrong. He kinda is a main tank. But the long answer is, it actually depends on the rest of the comp. There's this general view at lower ranks that the hero who provides the big rectangle shield is the main tank. So by that logic, Sigma is undoubtedly a main tank. But that definition also excludes Wrecking Ball, who is arguably a main tank in most situations. And to a lesser extent, because the shield isn't rectangle, it excludes Winston, who is literally always a main tank. So I would say that just because Sigma provides a blue rectangle doesn't automatically make him a main tank. And just because someone doesn't have a blue rectangle doesn't mean they're not a main tank. And honestly, anything else I say in this video is purely conjecture, because we haven't seen how the pros are going to play him. They could actually play him as an off-tank, but personally, right now, I think probably he is a main tank. But there is another aspect to being a main tank, dictating the rules of engagement. I'm a little biased here, but in my opinion, the main tank is the absolute cornerstone of every comp in the game. The whole comp should be built around the main tank, or if you want to look at it the opposite way, the main tank should be picked based on what's going to enable your team most. The main tank needs to make space and allow your DPS to do their job. And the best way to explain this is to give examples, I guess. Orisa obviously enables the bunker style of play, but she doesn't just do that via shield placement. I mean, I guess on defense, literally just placing a shield can sometimes be enough to hold your ground. If the rest of your team can do enough damage, it can create something of an impassable boundary that the enemy has to deal with. But as I said before, shield doesn't necessarily equal main tank. The shield with damage behind it only prevents the enemy from taking space from you. The shield alone doesn't really create space unless your DPS outclass the enemy by a lot. But in that case, I would argue that it's not really Orisa making space, I would argue that it's the DPS carrying. And that's a problem you see with a lot of tanks at lower ranks. They think you can just place a shield and that's their job done. But a shield alone doesn't create space, it just establishes space. The other thing a main tank has to do is create frag opportunities. In a dive comp, that means discording a target, Winston and D.Va jumping in, and DPS cleaning up. In that situation, Winston provides a shield which obviously protects his team, but he and D.Va also soften up targets so the DPS can frag out. That's how Winston creates frag opportunities. He creates an environment that makes it safer for dive DPS to do what they need to do and soften them up so they can finish off kills. In a bunker comp, it's Halt that creates the frag opportunities. The shield might give your team some breathing room, but it's Halt that gives your team the opportunity to score a kill. That's why Orisa Hog is so strong. Halt Hook is basically a guaranteed kill, and the threat of being Halt Hooked means the enemy has to think very carefully about where they stand, including having to fall back if necessary. That threat of being Halt Hook comboed is what creates space, and it's also why you kinda need to run Hog if you're gonna play Orisa on attack, aside from Pirate Ship where D.Va sometimes works better. If both sides are equally skilled, and there's no threat of being Halt Hooked, Orisa will actually struggle to aggressively take space. Of course, there are other things you can combo into Halt, like a Hanzo arrow or whatever, so you can totally get away without a Hog, but it's still the threat of being pulled that creates the space. Sigma, while he can send out a shield, doesn't really enable dive very well, and his shield uptime is pretty bad compared to Orisa. Plus, he has no way to create frag opportunities if you play him in a bunker style. He also doesn't share much in common with Wrecking Ball in his engagement style, so he doesn't create or establish space in the same way that a Winston or Orisa can. So the best comparison you can make with Sigma is REINHART, and I get a strong feeling that Blizzard modelled Sigma on REINHART's playstyle to a certain extent. The execution and strengths and weaknesses are quite different, but there are a huge number of similarities between the two characters as well. The main thing with Sigma that gives me REINHART vibes is the way that Sigma mirrors work. As someone who's played a lot of REINHART, Sigma mirrors work in a very similar way to REINHART mirrors. He has that kind of rock, paper, scissors ability usage thing going on. With REINHART, the rock, paper, scissors is something like shield counters earth shatter counters charge, and charge counters shield. That's an oversimplification, but unlike Winston, Orisa, or Wrecking Ball, REINHART mirrors have a lot of mind games and counterplay, and personally that's what I think makes REINHART a lot of fun to play. Sigma has, to a lesser extent, a similar thing going on. For example, shield counters rock and rock counters shift. It's not quite the same as REINHART, but I think it's roughly what Blizzard were going for, fun mirror matches. Now, at first, I thought that Sigma would be like an inferior REINHART if you played him as a main tank. His shield can't take as much damage, it takes longer to recharge, he doesn't have an ability like Fire Strike that can go through shields, and while the rock is really good, it's hard countered by shields, unlike REINHART's charge. But actually, the situations you would play Sigma in are slightly different to the ones you would play REINHART in. For example, if you're playing into Reaper, you really need the support of your team, otherwise he's going to shred you as REINHART. Sigma, on the other hand, can not only survive against Reaper quite well, he can turn that momentum the other way by turning Reaper's damage into a giant personal shield. In fact, Sigma's shift ability makes him uniquely strong against any kind of spam damage. The same thing applies against Bastion and Junkrat. Where REINHART might struggle to close the gap against that sort of thing before his shield breaks, Sigma can just W through chokes and use that spam to fuel his aggression. And actually, the more I play Sigma, the more I realise why his shield takes less damage and charges more slowly. While he doesn't have any movement abilities, he can actually walk at full speed while placing shields. REINHART walks a lot slower while holding up the shield, which means he takes space a little more slowly than Sigma. Plus, even if you shield hop to move up more quickly as Rein, you're not creating any damage pressure while doing it. You need to be up in people's faces to do that. Sigma can close the gap at full speed and achieve full damage potential at the same time. So I can almost guarantee, from a balance perspective, that's why Sigma's shield is weaker than REINHART's on paper. But in practice, it's just as strong, if not stronger in some scenarios. The only reason REINHART even needs a shield that large is to get into effective range before it breaks. Sigma can get into effective range much faster, so he doesn't need a 2000 HP shield. Plus, I don't think the recharge time is much of an issue because he has more damage mitigation than REINHART does via his shift ability. And that's not even mentioning the 100 HP shield health he has. It might not seem like much, but if you weave his shift and shield correctly, Sigma can often regen that 100 health without the help of his supports. And that's a pretty big deal. in some situations it makes him an incredibly survivable tank despite only having 400 HP total. But being highly survivable and relatively quick to close the gap compared to Reinhardt or Orisa doesn't explain how he makes space or how he creates frag opportunities. Well, honestly, the way he does that is, again, similar to Reinhardt, and it's one of the reasons people are playing him with Zarya so often. I've been finding the best way to play Sigma with Zarya is very similar to Reinhardt. Play super aggressive, get up in people's faces and hit them. If you do it right, playing that way creates a statement. Move back when I come at you or you're going to die. Obviously that playstyle requires you to be hitting your primary fire fairly consistently. If I play aggro but I whiff my shots, which is definitely quite easily done compared to just swinging a hammer at people, the enemy won't respect the space I'm trying to take. But if you do it right, you'll charge up your Zarya just as much as you would as Reinhardt, and you can burst down squishies a lot more consistently than Reinhardt can. Plus, Sigma can actually push into bunker more easily than Reinhardt, so I can definitely see Sigma being played as a main tank into bunker. But one thing I unfortunately haven't properly seen yet is how Sigma Zarya plays into Rein Zarya. Sigma's ultimate definitely outclasses Earthshatter in this matchup, because Reinhardt has no way to stop it, but Sigma can stop Reinhardt's ult. But in the neutral game, I could potentially see Sigma having a bit of a hard time with a Reinhardt in his face. Sigma, on his own, has no way to mitigate Reinhardt's swings or Zarya's beam once they close the gap. Yes, I know shield blocks Zarya's beam, but once she's close enough, she can easily just push through your barrier. And unfortunately, I haven't really played into a good Rein Zarya combo yet, but I feel like it could be a weakness in the Sigma Zarya combo. And in this scenario, you need to keep Reinhardt out of swinging range, so you could do that with Lucio boops and stuff like that, but that's where my favourite Sigma Wrecking Ball combo might come into play. Unlike Zarya, Wrecking Ball can keep Reinhardt out of his effective range while pushing him into a range where your friendly Sigma has an advantage. Of course, Sigma Hammond has its own weaknesses, but I still stand by my opinion that Sigma Wrecking Ball is an amazing combo. And you know what? The fact that Wrecking Ball is the one keeping people in Sigma's effective range does kind of make Wrecking Ball the off-tank in that comp. It's a bit of a hybrid thing, because Wrecking Ball can boot people into the air to create frag opportunities, but in general, yeah. You guys have persuaded me. Sigma is a main tank, and not just because of his shield. Sure, if you played him with Orisa, he does kind of take something of an off-tank role, but in pretty much any other comp he plays in, he is almost certainly the main tank. I think Sigma is a lot stronger than people realise. I think it's really cool that Blizzard have created a tank with such a high skill cap, and in many ways his release and community reaction reminds me a lot of how people reacted to Ana when she was added. People thought she was an absolute garbage tier healer for some reason compared to Mercy, which is really funny to think about now, but pretty soon people realised the power of the sleep dart, anti-nade and her raw burst healing, and ever since she's been a top pick in many situations. I can definitely see the same thing happening with Sigma. He's got a high skill cap, but once people figure out how he's meant to be played, I think he's going to be a very strong pick in many situations. I don't think we've seen exactly where he's strong and where he's not yet, because comps on the PTR just don't give you a good sense of things. So I'm pretty excited to see how things play out when he goes live, and even more so when we see the pros get their hands on him. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please feel free to subscribe for more gaming guides, news and discussion. And don't forget to check out the links below to Patreon, Discord and Twitch. Until next time, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.